Everyone, Jim with Evolution Power Sports here today to talk about Kawasaki H2 blow-off valves. Okay, and the impetus for this video is, I've seen a few videos out there of, people changing the routing of the factory BOV or an aftermarket BOV. And what we want to do is demystify that, show exactly how the system works. And this is going to be a long video, so buckle up. All right, so now we're going to get into, exactly how the blow-off valve solenoid works, and and the routing and how that would change the way it works. Okay, so right now, stock, the routing comes from the basically by the throttle blades. Okay, and that gives you a vacuum signal, comes through this solenoid, and then at really low throttle openings, it basically bridges these two ports. So the air comes in here and then has the effect on the top side of the blow-off valve. Okay, and usually it's both a vacuum and a boost signal, depending upon the throttle opening and the RPM of the engine. Okay, now once you get above about 10% TPS, the ECU commands that it energizes the solenoid and basically bridges these two ports. So now you have the port from the top side of from the plenum to the blow-off valve. And people will ask, well, why do you want, that pressure? Well, that pressure is a little bit higher than the pressure behind the throttle valve. And what happens is, if you change that routing and eliminate the solenoid, basically now you have that vacuum signal and you're going to be listening to the blow-off valve being open at, a lot more throttle positions than the factory designed. Okay. The other thing is that because there's slightly higher pressure in the plenum, and it's about 1/2 pound, you want that extra pressure to hold the blow-off valve closed under high boost situations. Okay. So that 1/2 pound can mean the difference of bleeding off a little bit of boost or having that valve cracked open slightly because of that pressure differential. So I've seen some videos where people want to eliminate basically the function of the solenoid. Okay, and the reason why that's not a good thing is, for the reasons we just talked about, and you're eliminating one of the safety features that's built into this. And I mentioned earlier that we have complete control over the solenoid through software, and there's a number of parameters that control the operation of that. Okay, one is TPS, one is PPS or pedal position, but the other is maximum boost. Okay, and the way it's programmed stock, you're never going to see that maximum boost opening, but it is conceivable that under certain conditions you could exceed that boost limit, and it may cause bad things. But there's a reason for it. We have control over it in software, and from what I can tell you is that the programming, the way it operates, is actually really good from the factory. Once we do supercharger gears, we may have to play with some of the conditions under which that opens, and probably raise that maximum boost threshold, but more to come on that. So one other thing I want to talk about is vent to atmosphere on the H2. And I don't think doing a vent to atmosphere BOV is a great idea on this vehicle. And the reason is that, this vehicle has 8 injectors, okay? 4, typical, fuel rail type injectors, but you also have 4 fogger injectors in the plenum, okay? And so what that means is that it's possible, I haven't seen any evidence of this, but it is possible that when you chop the throttle, those fogger injectors are active when you're under full throttle, okay? And so when you chop the throttle, it's conceivable that you could get a little bit of fuel that comes out of, the port on the blow-off valve. Again, I haven't seen any evidence of that, but it's a $45,000 machine. We certainly don't want a fire in the engine compartment because you have fuel coming out. So it's my opinion that that we should stick to a standard recirculating type system on this. I think that's the best safety, and a lot of people are complaining about the sound already, and a vent atmosphere VOV is going to make that more annoying. I guess if you love that sound, which I do personally, but not all the time, only when you chop the throttle. All right, so now I want to show some data because there have been some claims that you get better throttle response when you basically eliminate the factory BOV solenoid. So I'm going to show you a couple of runs. These two runs were done under virtually identical conditions. Okay, same pressure, same humidity, same correction factor, same temperature within 1 degree. Okay, the bottom one is the stock BOV routing. The top one, or the red trace, is with the BOV routing, eliminating the solenoid. Okay, and you can see there is no difference whatsoever in these two. This is about as close as you can get to 2 runs. And there's no difference in spool up, throttle response, anything. Okay, these runs were started at about 15 miles an hour, so that would be like a part throttle. One run has the factory solenoid in place. The other run has the routing, again behind the throttle body, and there's no difference. All right, now I'm going to show 2 other runs, and this is with the stock BOV. So basically, here are 2 runs. The top run is with the BOV routing stock. The bottom run is with the BOV routing, eliminating the BOV solenoid. Okay, and you can see the difference in boost. You're losing 3/4 pound of boost, just with changing that routing. Now the stock BOV is more susceptible to that because it's not that great of a design. There's no sealing O-rings on the piston, so that is going to be more susceptible to changes. With our BOV, you could see in the previous run there really is no difference, but you definitely don't want to change the routing if you have stock BOV because you will lose power. All right, everyone, and now I want to talk about the blow-off valve itself, the factory blow-off valve, what's good about it, what's not good about it, and why you should replace it with an EVP blow-off valve. So first of all, the factory valve, this is a mass-produced part. There's nothing real special. It's not a bad part other than the fact that it doesn't have any sealing O-rings on the bottom side. So it's basically just using like a touch connection between the piston and the body, which is not, doesn't seal completely. And what happens is the more boost you make, even though you have that boost pressure on the top side holding it closed, you get more leakage around the sealing surface. Okay, so it's okay, but definitely there's performance gains to be had with running our blow-off valve. Okay, and so now I want to talk about our blow-off valve. We started designing our own blow-off valves back in 2016. Okay, because what we saw, there wasn't a lot of power sports sized BOVs on the market at that time, and that were compact and were able to fit and work properly. And so since then, we've sold about 25,000 blow-off valves to the power sports community. It's more than all the other companies combined put together, probably times 3. So, and the number of returns we've had on blow-off valves, I can count on one hand in 25,000. Okay, and the reason is that it's the best blow-off valve on the market, bar none. These are made by a U.S. company. It's 50 miles from here. We've been working with them for about 15 years. They're an ISO 9001 facility. They make very, very precision parts. The tolerances are held to within 1/10,000th of an inch. Okay, and even though blow-off valves look like a simple part, the tolerances have to be just right for them to work properly. Okay. Now, another couple of features that I want to show is, we make our spring adjustable. So you can adjust, basically that pressure where the blow-off valve begins to open based upon how tight you wind or loose you wind the cap. Okay, and that's not what keeps the valve closed under boost pressure. Some people think that. It's the pressure on the top side that keeps the valve closed, or under vacuum situations pulls it open. Okay, the spring is really there to tune that opening under vacuum or partial vacuum type situation. Okay, but with that said, despite the precision machining, our valve is hard anodized, piston is Teflon coated, 2 sealing O-rings, and like I said, just a precision part that we have virtually no issues with whatsoever. The other thing I want to mention is we race all of the parts that we make. Okay, there's some companies out there that do racing, but nobody has been involved in the racing community the way we have for the last 15 years. Okay, we run our own Best in the Desert program. We run our own drag race program. We work with the top short course racers in the world, and they run our parts because they work and they don't fail. Okay, that's that's the rigor that our blow-off valve testing has gone through over the years. All right, I know this has been a long video, but we really wanted to dive deep into how the BOV system works on the Kawasaki H2. So keep your BOV routing stock. There's good reasons to keep it that way. Change your BOV to an EVP BOV. You'll gain some performance, some sound, and you won't lose boost. And you can check us out at evopowersports.com for these products.